Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday everybody. First up, let's discuss the ongoing Taiwan situation. Yesterday, the PLA Eastern Theater Command formally announced an end to this round of military exercises, but added that it will continue to carry out military training and, quote, organize, normalize combat readiness security patrols in the Taiwan Strait, end quote. Multiple U.S. media outlets are reporting that the United States Navy intends on sending ships through the Taiwan Strait. However, the New York Times writes that, quote, officials said they would not send the Ronald Reagan, the Japanese-based aircraft carrier, because it would be too provocative, end quote. Meanwhile, Taiwan Affairs Office of the State Council and the State Council Information Office released Beijing's third ever white paper on Taiwan, the first of its kind in 22 years. The white paper states, quote, we maintain that after peaceful reunification, Taiwan may continue its current social system and enjoy a high degree of autonomy in accordance with the law, end quote. Two things to note here. First, the paper guarantees the social system, but is silent on the legal or governance system. And second, the wording in accordance with the law here is important. This is the phrasing which Beijing used to justify the passage and enforcement of Hong Kong's so-called national security law as legitimate. It's also worth noting in the two previous white papers on Taiwan, in 1993 and 2000, Beijing committed that it would, quote, not send troops or administrative personnel to be based in Taiwan, end quote. In this new version of the Taiwan White Paper, this line has been removed. The paper also states, quote, national reunification by peaceful means is the first choice of the CPC and of the Chinese government in resolving the Taiwan question, end quote, but maintains that non-peaceful means, to use its wording, remains a legitimate option for Beijing. Indeed, it goes further than previous versions in spelling this out. Quote, the white paper included new content based on the situation of the new era, including specific warnings to the successionist Democratic Progressive Party, DPP. Some observers believe that such effort is similar to the Peking model. In January 1949, the PLA encircling Peking, now the capital, Beijing, which was then occupied by the KMT forces, and eventually forced the KMT commanders to surrender, so the liberation of the city was peaceful, end quote. The paper also confirms what analysts have suspected over the last week of military exercises, that is, that the drills are part of a more muscular new status quo for Beijing's actions in the Taiwan Strait. Quote, such an approach needs to be carried out step by step, and to normalize the current military drills around the island is one step forward. If smart reunification still cannot realize our final goal, however, a more direct approach based on strength will be needed, end quote. Next up, and continuing from our examination of the outbreak situation yesterday, the situation has further deteriorated overnight and is fast becoming the worst outbreak in well over a month. If we forgive the cold-hearted calculus, at the very least the more concerning outbreaks are currently not near any major logistics hubs or large economic centers. Currently, the three main regions of concern are Hainan Province in the south, as well as Tibet and Xinjiang. In Lhasa, 2,000 emergency hospital beds have been prepared, and several zones in the Tibetan city have been locked down or restricted. Now, moving from one controversial locality to another, Xinjiang's Urumqi is also experiencing an outbreak of the highly contagious BA.5.2 variant, and several areas of that city have now gone into lockdown too, officially for 5 days. Now, this brings us to the main part of today's video, the economy. Now let's move through several key economic and financial updates from the last 24 hours. The massive Japanese multinational conglomerate SoftBank Group Corp has announced that it will sell down its stake in Chinese technology giant Alibaba Group Holdings Limited, a move which is expected to net the investment giant a cool $34 billion gain for the 242 million Alibaba American depository receipts. The sale will reduce SoftBank's stake from 23.7% to 14.6%. There has been pressure on SoftBank, which itself has experienced a tough year for some time now, to sell down its position in Alibaba. The original bet in Alibaba has been seen by many in the industry as one of the most lucrative in venture capital history. Now, on this theme, and continuing with our coverage from yesterday, UK-based Japanese-owned Financial Times writes that Taiwan national security officials want to force Apple supplier Foxconn to unwind an $800 million US dollar investment in Chinese company Tsinghua Unigroup as Taipei seeks to align itself more closely with the United States in the face of escalating threats from Beijing. Quote, "The investment by Foxconn, the world's largest contract electronics manufacturer and the biggest private sector employer in China, was announced last month and made the group the second largest shareholder in Tsinghua. But the deal put one of Taiwan's biggest companies at the center of Beijing's growing technology competition with the West. Taipei is concerned that the deal could lead to Foxconn bankrolling and acceleration in Beijing's tech ambitions." End quote. Next up, China saw surging pork costs in July, which, due to the importance of the meat to Chinese consumption, and despite weak general consumer demand, pushed China's consumer inflation to its highest level in 2 years. According to data published yesterday by the National Bureau of Statistics, pork prices surged over 20%, pulling the consumer price index to 2.7% in July year-on-year. Of course, this inflation is not as bad as other major economies this year, though we remember this doesn't necessarily mean China's economy is more healthy than high-inflation economies, any more than an anorexic has healthier eating habits than someone with obesity. Indeed, China's challenge is weak demand. While rising pork prices are expected to push up the CPI this year, core inflation, which excludes the volatile prices of food and energy, remains stable, slowing to 0.8% in July. Now, last up for the economy and for today's video, the housing crisis. Bloomberg's Hong Kong team writes today that Chinese banks' issuance of mortgage-backed securities has collapsed, in the most recent example of how the crisis in the China property sector is bleeding into the real economy and, of particular concern to policymakers, the financial sector. And by collapse, we mean collapse. According to cnabs.com, a website that tracks asset-backed securities in China, sales of residential mortgage-backed securities have fallen an incredible 92% so far this year to $3.63 billion US. Indeed, there hasn't been a single issuance of a residential mortgage-backed security since February. Quote, "The lack of RMBS sales this year shows the ripple effects of unprecedented property woes that have triggered record defaults by developers and heightened risks for Chinese lenders, especially as owners of unfinished homes have been joining a boycott on mortgage payments." End quote. It's been a hard fall for what was once a very popular asset class. Indeed, according to a recent Fitch ratings report, during the period 2018 through 2021, Chinese banks sold over $300 billion US worth of mortgage-backed securities, making China the world's second largest market for the instrument, behind the United States. Because the value behind a mortgage-backed security lies in the underlying asset, the mortgage on a property, this collapse is a scary look at just how little market confidence there is currently in China's property market. Hey guys, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to the like button, and for anyone who wants to go the extra mile and help me continue making these videos every day, Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. It's just me that makes these every day, and this is the best way to help keep it financially sustainable for the channel. That is today's episode of China Update, everybody. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Thank you so much for the ongoing support. I will see you all tomorrow.